So here we are, November is dragging on and you're still sitting on that buck tag. It feels like the rut is winding down, action is starting to slow up, and your best bet might be waiting on that late season bed to food pattern. But the reality is that early November chaos isn't gone, it's just bottlenecked down into fewer areas. Because this time of the year, those bucks are worn down, but they are still cruising on instinct. And both the bucks and the does are relying on that best remaining cover now more than ever. And that's the beauty of farm country. Cover is always limited, but definitely in the later parts of November, it's even more limited, so those deer that are still moving in daylight are doing so through predictable high odds pinch points. So in this video, I'm going to break down 3 different late November pinch points that continue to produce even after the weeks of continuously increasing hunting pressure, the exact spots where you can still expect to catch a buck cruising for those last receptive does. By the end, you're going to know why these pinch points work, what makes them so reliable this time of the year, and how to identify them on a map. And by the way, I'm Greg Kazmersky. I help landowners design and improve their whitetail properties. I help Ohio hunters buy and sell hunting land, and I'm working on building a community of growth-minded whitetail hunters who are looking to take their strategies and success to the next level. And if you're looking for an even deeper breakdown on these 3 pinch points, one that includes access routes and different stand locations, I just finished up a course in my Next Level Whitetail School community, and I also unlocked a 7-day free trial for my community, so you can go ahead and join that completely risk-free and check out that course, and do so through the link in the description below. Now let's dive in. Now, no matter where you hunt, whether it be farm country, hill country, public land, or private land, deer are always going to gravitate to one thing, and that is security. And the easiest form of security for a deer is high quality cover. By the time we reach the back half of November, that hunting pressure has continuously been climbing for weeks. Most of the crops are out, the leaves are gone off of the trees, and that natural vegetation is fading, so all of that cover is slowly shrinking by the day. That means that the deer are going to start piling into the thickest, safest places that remain on a property. And here's where it gets really good for you farm country hunters. Quality cover is limited, which makes the movement around it much more predictable. If you can identify those last remaining pockets of high quality cover, you can begin to narrow down where that predictable daylight movement is going to happen. But even then, there will still be that element of randomness. Late November hasn't always given me a clean pattern. Sometimes the bucks will show up at 8 a.m. one day and 1 p.m. the next day. And that's why these pinch points that I'm going to break down are great places to spend as much time in the tree as possible. You are going to be hunting where that movement is very likely to happen, even if the timing of that movement is unpredictable. And before you commit to a long sit, a quick scouting trip around the edge of the cover can tell you everything you need to know. Fresh tracks, new rubs, and even fresh scat, those are all going to be things that can give you an indicator that those deer are using that pocket of cover right now. When you put all of that together, you've got this foundation for the 3 pinch points that we're about to break down. And each one of them is built around the most consistent late November truth that there is: when you find the cover, you're going to find the deer. Now, there's 2 things that deer naturally follow in farm country, and that's habitat edge and terrain pinch points. And when both of those things overlap, you have one of the most reliable pinch points in all of farm country. A terrain and habitat edge hybrid pinch point, as I'm calling it, is a location within the terrain that forces deer into a tight route, and that same route just so happens to line up with the habitat edge that they already prefer to travel. And there's 2 versions that I love to target in farm country. The first is drainages that run off of fields, and these are basically farm country versions of the drainage tops that I rely on in hill country. As those drainages drop off of the fields, they get very steep, sometimes washed out and extremely narrow, and most of the time the deer will always cross in 1 or 2 of the same spots. It's predictable, it's natural, and bucks will use them consistently when they're covering a lot of ground. The second is a bench or a flat spot above a steep drop-off. A lot of farm properties are going to have this narrow shelf between the edge of the field and then a very sharp slope. This might look very insignificant on a map, but the deer will use this bench as a safe, efficient travel route because it keeps them hidden from the field while avoiding that steep drop down below. Both spots have one thing in common, and it's that a buck will eventually pass through them while they're covering a lot of ground. But there is a very specific combination that I like to target at the end of November, and that's when that terrain funnel aligns with the bedding thicket on the the other side of that habitat edge. When that drainage crossing or bench hugs a bedding thicket, it becomes a high odds spot where cruising bucks can scent check the entire bedding area with very minimal effort. They're going to stay concealed using that wind to their advantage and have the ability to duck into that cover whenever they need to, all while traveling a predictable path that you can hunt very effectively. Now you're going to find plenty of terrain funnels that align with the habitat edge where the other side is an open field, and those can be great at different parts of the season, but when we're talking about focusing on that cover in the later part of November, I really like to be on the edge of a bedding thicket. And unlike the other pinch points that I'm going to cover in this video, I'm not necessarily worried about finding fresh sign. These spots make so much sense for me in late November that I'm not necessarily relying on that sign to confirm it. If the other side of that habitat edge is a bedding thicket and the terrain creates a predictable travel funnel, that is usually enough for me to plan a setup. Now, when the deer are relying heavily on that best remaining cover, one of the most predictable locations to find them cruising will be a bottleneck. Simply put, a bottleneck is a place where a wide section of cover will naturally squeeze into a much narrower strip, forcing deer to travel through a tight, predictable zone. You can think of it exactly like the neck of a pop bottle. Everything is wide at the bottom, then it slowly narrows down into one concentrated path. And in late November, that wider section has to be bedding cover in order for me to feel like it's worth targeting. Does are going to be spending most of their daylight hours tucked inside of that thick cover, and bucks are going to be moving in and out of it, trying to scent check for those last few receptive does. Instead of walking in the wide open and exposing themselves, they're just going to slip through that narrow strip of cover. And here's the biggest key for me: the tighter that pinch, the better. When you're able to cover all or at least most of that narrow strip with your bow, your odds are going to go way up because the deer don't have many options to slide through that pinch point outside of bow range. Now, before I commit to a sit in one of these bottlenecks, I do like to do a quick scouting mission just to confirm that there is activity in that bedding area. You can do a quick walk around the edge of the cover looking for entry and exit trails dumping in and out of that bottleneck, plus a few rubs inside that bottleneck itself is usually all the confirmation that I need to get up into a tree. Now, when the deer are glued to that thickest cover that they can find, one of the easiest ways to stay ahead of them is placing your focus on those thin strips of cover connecting two bigger chunks of security cover. A thin strip of connecting cover is exactly what it sounds like. It's a narrow line of brush, timber, or some type of a natural structure that links two larger sections of cover. It might be a skinny strip of timber, a drainage ditch running in between two different ag fields, or an old overgrown fence line that never got knocked down. The best way to picture it is like a bridge crossing a river. You can come from a dozen different roads to get to that bridge, but everyone crosses the same narrow span to get to the other side. These thin strips of cover work the exact same way for deer. These strips become extremely effective when the ground on both sides of it is exposed, something like cut corn, short grass, tilled up ground, or anything that deer don't want to always walk through in daylight. Because when that is the situation, the only way that deer can move from one bedding area to the next is by moving through that thin strip of cover. Now, these can also shine when you have a brushy field, one that acts as a doe bedding area on one side of this thin strip and then an open field on the other side. When the wind is blowing from the bedding area towards that thin strip of cover, the bucks can cruise the entire thing and scent check that whole doe bedding area in one smooth pass without ever stepping foot in the open. It's very simple, very efficient, and when it's late November and those bucks are sticking to that thick cover, it's the type of predictable travel pattern that you can capitalize on. And for me, scouting these thin strips of cover is very similar to the bottleneck. You can do it quickly and efficiently. I like to slip right along the edge of where that wide cover starts to funnel down into that thin strip, looking for things like fresh tracks entering or exiting out of the thin strip or cover, or even fresh rubs right along the edge. When that sign is fresh and that thin strip of cover connects two different bedding pockets, that is more than enough confirmation for me to hang a set. So those are three different farm country pinch points that I like to rely on when the rut seems to be tapering off, the hunting pressure continues to be high, and the deer are sticking to that thickest cover left around. They're very simple, very predictable, and most importantly, these are the types of locations that can produce year after year. Because even when that chaos of early November fades, bucks are still going to be covering ground, they're still going to be checking doe groups, and they're still going to be funneling through these exact routes. Now, if this video helped you spot a pinch point that you've been overlooking where you hunt, or gave you an idea of where you're going to put yourself in the back half of November, please do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment down below with your biggest takeaway, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And as always, if you want to go deeper, go inside my Next Level Whitetail Whitetail school community. I built a full course on all of these pinch points, including specific tree stand locations and access routes that keep the spot as low pressure as possible. You can unlock that entire course with a 7-day free trial, which is linked down below. Thank you all for watching. Good luck out there. Stay patient, and remember, in late November, it only takes one brief moment in time to change your entire season.